Greetings, and welcome to Beatles Stuffology, where two old friends sit around and talk BS, Beatles stuff, on a track-by-track basis pretty much for the sake of it. My name is JG McQuarrie, and I'm here with my co-host, Andrew Deacon. Say hi, Andrew.
How are you?
I'm doing all right, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm looking out onto an English country garden and it's raining.
Well, that seems thematically appropriate.
Sorry. Right, no, we had a little race against time there. Just before recording, I had to dash into another room to pick up a copy of something that I needed for the recording. And then I realised I'd gone to the wrong room. And in my ear, I could hear poor old JG doing his usual introduction. I was thinking, I'm not going to get there in time. Just made it. Just made it. Yeah. But hey, all's exciting in the world of Beatles, isn't it? Because we're nearing the end of November, and the Beatles are hawking their wares yet again. Now there'll be lots of other podcasts, dear listener, who've been talking about this. In fact, I saw in my podcast feed that Mark Lewison's been on the apparently defunct but not defunct Nothing Is Real, talking about Anthology 4. Haven't listened to it yet, but then I haven't listened to Anthology 1, 2 or 3 either, as I am, let me remind you, the worst Beatles fan in the world. But there you go. Do you want to talk about Anthology 4, or are you all anthologied out?
I'm not sure that I've really got an awful lot to say about it at this stage. I've listened to about half of it, and nothing I've heard so far has been particularly revelatory. But it's the first half I've listened to so far, so a lot of it is just kind of like the rock and roll songs being played slightly differently. So I'm waiting for my socks to be blown off. I'm waiting for that big moment you go, oh yeah, this is what justifies the project. But I haven't quite come across it yet, and I haven't started watching the remastered TV episodes yet, nor indeed have I seen the new one. So I don't know that I've got a lot to say really.
Okay, so that's interesting. So there are going to be new episodes.
Well, a new episode, yes, one new
Okay,
one, I
a
believe.
new episode. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't. I think we have said this before. I can't remember. Was it 96, 97, something like that when it came out originally?
Yeah, 96.
And I didn't watch them then, but so maybe I will have a look this time to see what information we can take from that to include in our fact-based podcast. But what I would
Excuse me, boss, I laughed derisively. Fact-based podcast.
what I would maybe suggest is an approach is that you're not allowed to listen to any Beatles song until just before we're meant to talk about it. But then you did tell me beforehand you are going to be doing that for one song in particular. But dear listener, you'll find out about that in about 2 years. Yeah, about 2 years time, and 3.5 albums. But bear in mind, one of those halves is a double album. So there you go. Right.
Plenty to look forward to there then.
Yeah. So I've kind of been trailing the song that we're doing today, not in the same way as we trailed Mr. Moonlight, but for some time I have been indicating that Rain is one of the most overrated songs in the Beatles' oeuvre. I thought I'd get that word in before you did. So it is with some trepidation that we launch into singing about who's doing the singing, talking
not me.
about Rain. And I should caveat this first and foremost in that actually I do think Rain is a good song. I just do not think it's the behemoth that certain I'm going to use one word from you that you used before the recording, and I'll chuck another one in. Hipster boomers. Yeah, bearded hipster boomers think is like, the best Beatles song ever, man. Which clearly it isn't. And let's do the other thing as well. But where McDonald generally agrees this to be the Beatles' finest B-side. And yet he only devotes about 1.5 pages to it, whereas he devotes about 12 pages to I Am the Walrus, which is the Beatles' finest B-side. Unless you really like Old Brown Shoe, and I do quite like Old Brown Shoe.
I like Old Brown Shoe too. I don't think I would say it's the best Beatles B-side, but I also slightly regret that it's relegated to a B-side. Yeah, it's a funny one, Rain. I mean, I think for our dear listeners, we aren't going to contradict each other all that much during this episode, because I think it's a really, really good song. but I think that's all it is. Now, speaking as a bearded Gen X hipster Beatles fan, I'm allowed to say that without sounding like a complete hypocrite. But it is a very good song. It's well written, it's well played, it's extremely well produced. Everything about it is fine, but it's taken on a kind of cultural and historical significance that I'm not sure it wholly deserves. And in a way, like, I completely agree that I'm the Walrus is the Beatles' best B-side, but in a way that I think I'm the Walrus kind of does deserve. And Rain is it's not a prelude to I'm the Walrus, but it kind of feels like it's leading us up in that direction. And for all the things that Rain does well, including the instrumentation, including the psychedelia, including the lyric, all the rest of it, I'm the Walrus just does it better. That doesn't denigrate from Rain's achievements, but it's also not the pinnacle either.
I think you can also have a look at what's going on around it, and I think that's where it's, contextualizing it is pretty important, because if you have a look at exactly what's going on in terms of Beatles recording in April 1966, when they start recording for Revolver, they open with, and this will always just blow my mind, Tomorrow Never Knows. And once they've started getting that sorted, they move on to Got to Get You Into My Life. And you just sort of think, well, hang on a minute, there is something really amazing going on here. Um, you know, then you've got Love You Too. Then, Paperback Writer. Yeah, take that as you wish. Then Rain. Then, and these are songs that I love, Dr. Robert and Your Bird Can Sing, um, Taxman, I'm Only Sleeping, and they finish the month by laying down most of Eleanor Rigby. This is unparalleled creativity. This is phenomenal. And even if you think that maybe one or two of those are a little bit weak, maybe you might think that Love You Too or I'm Only Sleeping aren't quite up there with some of the others. The fact that even if you just pick some of Lennon's songs there, he is just hitting his straps and just producing some of his finest work.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a reason that a lot of people will say that Revolver is the Beatles' best album, kind of. I don't want to say objectively because objectively is absolutely the wrong word, but it's a stunning achievement, and it's just the fact that everybody is really really at their peak. Yeah, I mean, you listed a bunch of songs there. Like, I love Love You Too. I love I Want to Tell You as well. I think it's an amazing song. And there's just no let up in it. And even like Yellow Submarine, which I kind of love as a sort of subversive slice of kind of mid 60s psychedelia. And we'll talk about that, in a couple of episodes' time. But even something like that, that's able to sit so well and bridge kind of different genres, children's song and sort of like psychedelic masterpiece, and sit comfortably alongside songs like Eleanor Rigby and Taxman and Tomorrow Never Knows, and still function well. I mean, it's just such a monumental achievement. And we start down that track by talking about Paperback Writer, which we did last episode, and Rain this episode. But the fact that there is that level of creativity and that much exciting material to talk about over the next few weeks is just genuinely breathtaking.
Late August 67, they record Your Mother Should Know. Then in early September, I Am the Walrus, followed by Blue Jay Way and Flying.
There you go.
So I Am the Walrus stands out as being something that is just peerless compared to the things that are being recorded around it. Rain is one of a bunch of amazing songs that are being produced that shows the general creativity. So I think if you are promoting Rain as being something more than the things that made it onto the album, and I think yeah, I'm just going to refer to my notes here because sometimes I write these sentences down the best. It's just the kind of song people performatively gravitate towards because they think It makes them seem hip. Um, but then if you just sort of have a look at everything else that's going on, then you have to work really, really hard to claim that Rain is beyond any of those others. So good luck with that, folks. But hey, if that's your opinion, good. You're entitled to it,
I
but
think
you're wrong.
well, quite. I think there is a lot of performative love of Rain, and some of it is clearly rooted in the quality of the song. But yeah, some of it is definitely rooted in that slightly gatekeepy. Oh, you didn't know about this? Ha! Well, now that aspect is kind of
Yeah.
slowly fading away now, particularly because there's no such thing as an obscure Beatles track anymore. Like everything is out there. Like we started the episode talking about Anthology. There's mountains and mountains and mountains of alternative takes and different versions and you name it, which are all kind of in the public domain now. But even before that, there were endless bootlegs and whatever. Scarcity just isn't a thing around Beatles recordings anymore. But when the only place you could find something like Rain was it Past Masters Volume 2, I think it was released on? That's a relatively obscure compilation. And you probably weren't going to find it in John Menzies or W.H. Smith's if you were browsing through their cassette collection. You would find Sergeant Pepper or you would find Magical Mystery Tour. So that scarcity, I think, really leans heavily into one of the reasons that it has become this kind of lightning rod for, oh, well, of course it's the best one. But that, I think, is starting to maybe fall away a little bit because it's simply not that obscure anymore. Like we were saying, like its qualities are self-evident. It's obviously a great song, but there are many, many, many great songs from this era. And when you get to contextualize the song in that way, it maybe doesn't seem quite as revelatory as it does when you're simply listening to it in isolation.
It was on the 1970 collection, which I did have on cassette. Hey Jude,
Oh, I'd
which was a
forgotten about that one.
yeah, no, it was. It's the one that I think has possibly the worst look that John Lennon ever had on it. Um,
Some competition there.
oh well, no, it's the really terrible beard and the awful wide brimmed hat he's got on. It's just not very good at all. But there you go. So we spent quite a bit of time talking about what this isn't. I think I'm going to start by saying what this absolutely is. And I think this is the final and clinching proof that Ringo is just one of the best drummers that's ever been in existence. And I think I do. There's a quote in an article that's on Far Out magazine website, uh, but where he talks about it being. I'd say I think it's the best out of all the records I've ever made. Now I've got no context on that. I don't know when he said that, and whether he thinks he's topped it since. But I think if I'm gonna big up anything on this track, it's gonna be Ringo. What he does here is just astonishing.
It's beyond brilliant, and like I can think of many just astoundingly good like Ringo performances. But I mean, this has to be up there. Of course, it does. It's a really genuinely amazing, effective piece of work. He is, yeah, he's never really better. What's really interesting is that there's a version of Rain, which is in the Revolver Super Deluxe release, which I'm sure everybody listening probably knows. But Rain was recorded, and then the backing track was slowed down in order to get this kind of heavy sound. And the Revolver Super Deluxe version has the original at the speed it was recorded before it was slowed down for the single version. And it's really interesting hearing Ringo play his line at the speed he actually played it at, not at the speed we listened to it at. And it just makes you appreciate all over again just how good he is, because he's playing this fast. It's kind of a weird experience listening to it at the actual speed, because to our ears, it sounds like it's sped up, but of course it's not. It's exactly the other way around. But like to have him be so perfect, so pinpoint accurate at that speed, and then have it slowed down to produce this effect on the final version. It's like just genuinely breathtaking. And yeah, like if anything, you're exactly right. If anything confirms Ringo's like status as one of the best drummers of all time, like it's got to be this.
Gives the song an attitude that I think is missing from elsewhere, because it's a pretty simple, straightforward song, isn't it? I mean, it's I think you've talked before about some of these Beatles songs that are written almost in with like a drone element to it,
Mm.
with a reduced number of chords, and you can get a sense in the lyrics as well that Lennon is developing his writing style. He's pushing beyond something traditional, and he's being very precise about a lot of the language that he uses, but he's also focusing on one tiny little element and repeating it with some alterations as it goes through in a way that's quite interesting. And that's why I think it's sort of similar to things like I'm Only Sleeping and then Walrus, in that you can see there's that kind of control mixed with something that I think you might recognize in some of Lewis Carroll's writing. There is an element of surrealism and absurdity that's baked within it. But beyond that, I think when they try to be too clever, and I think the slowing it down is possibly an argument in relation to that. So some of that the audio tricks they're playing on it, and definitely with the backward stuff, I think they're trying to make something out of a decent song, and they think they're pushing the limits of technology when they're not. It's a little bit like, Lennon talking about, oh, we were the first to use feedback in that way, and go, well, yeah, you used it briefly, and it's quite nice. It sets the tone, but then once you've gone on past that little bit of feedback, you've got quite a normal, straightforward pop song, good pop song, but a normal, straightforward pop song. And with this, I don't think you need that backward stuff. And I think it just is there because you think you need to be a little bit clever, because perhaps you've realised there isn't as much to the song as you might first have thought.
Well, I think the song, the lyric itself is based around a very simple, like binary opposition, isn't it? It's sun and rain. That's kind of it. Now, I suppose it depends how much you want to regard those things as symbolic representations of something else, or whether you think that they are just simply um, what they are. I think it's interesting that initially when Lennon started talking about the song, he said, "Oh, it's just about people moaning about the weather," and then as the song's reputation grew, it kind of like the story that went along with the song grew with it. So now, it's all about headspace. It's all about the psychedelic experience. It's all about LSD. It's all about all these other things. Now, obviously, it can be two things. It's the fact that it was initially a song that was maybe just about the weather or people complaining about the weather doesn't mean that it can't also be something that he eventually fed his other experiences into. But it's still based around that relatively simple opposition. And, that's fine. Like, it's a perfectly effective thing, but you can only go so far with that. And so, yeah, of course, you have a lot of studio trickery. I'm not completely in agreement with you with the backward stuff. They are kind of pushing the limits of the technology of the time. It doesn't sound like much today, but that's you as always. Context is important. So this doesn't sound like, for example, Paperback Writer. I love Paperback Writer, as I think we made clear last episode. I adore it, but there's a lot of stuff going on in this song that isn't really going on in Paperback Writer, which is sort of demonstrably a simpler song. So I find at least some of those studio techniques effective, like the slowing down of the track and the slight speeding up of Lennon's vocal. I find that very effective. It does lend this song a texture, and I don't want to say weight because I hate it when people say, "Oh, it sounds heavy," but but it does alter the sonics of the song, and it doesn't sound like any other Beatles song that we've listened to up to this point, including Paperback Writer. But again, that only takes you so far. We will see much more kind of development and much more sophistication when it comes to using sort of studio techniques like this as we carry on through, and particularly into the sort of Sergeant Pepper and sort of Magical Mystery Tour eras. So again, like it all sounds like I'm being terribly negative, and I really don't mean to be. I do think it's a great song, and I do really appreciate what they have tried to do in the studio, and I think it's effective on its own terms. But again, I think it's kind of the start of the story, not the end of it.
Yeah, I wonder though what happened when they listened back to it and they listened to the backward stuff, whether they were just so out of their minds on dope and speed, to
Excellent,
quote
excellent,
the
excellent reference. I
thank you very
strongly
much.
approve.
Thank you very much. That they thought say that it sounded really really cool, or whether they thought, oh god, this is a little bit embarrassing. Let's never do that again. And it would have been nice to have known how they would have rounded the song out if that wasn't on there, because that doesn't. We'll come back to covers in a bit, but it's something that most people thankfully don't tackle when they're doing that, when they're actually covering the song. And I suppose the other thing then is actually it made it a little bit okay. Again, I'm looking at this with 2025 vision. When they were doing a TV performance of it, um, I can't remember if that was part of the two songs that they did for Top of the Pops, but anyway, that Lennon is then miming the backward stuff, and he looks a little bit embarrassed that he's having to do it, and I think quite rightly so. Yeah, I mean, you can kind of get away with miming a backwards guitar solo.
Yeah, but it's kind of meaningless to mime a backwards vocal.
Yeah, absolutely. But when it comes to the lyrics, um, yeah, okay, so the meaning, let's put that on to one side. I think the simplicity of it is really really interesting, um, and there is complexity within the simplicity that I think is important. So, for a start, much like you've got the kind of like the drone of the song itself, you've got the repetition in the first verse of "If the Rain Comes" three times. Then in the second verse, when the sun shines, to quote Liam Gallagher, three times as well. And then I can show you, and I think that's really good. But then you also get the little bit, so they slip into the shade and sip their lemonade. And I think that's the control in that is pretty clever. And I like the fact that he sort of had an idea, right? So when it's bad, and I'm going to assume he's talking about British people here. When the weather's bad, the British people stay indoors, look out the window, and say, "Isn't the weather bad?" Then when the weather's really really nice, British people stay indoors where it's cool and look outside and go, "Oh, it's too hot." I think fine. I think you and I would both recognise that as a stereotype that has something in it. So the fact that he's doing that rather than broadening it out into a much wider theme, I think is a really good idea. And I like the fact that we are starting to play with these as ideas. I think it's just clever, and I think it's one of his cleverest, most controlled lyrics to date. However, yeah, if I'm putting that and I'm putting that with the drumming, it still lacks the complexity of the other things that the Beatles are recording at the time. It lacks the passion and just the way out there flair of "got to get you into my life." The energy that goes into that. This is something that they seem to have said, well, you know what, we'll do a low energy performance on this, and that'll be fine. I'd love to have known what it would have been like if, and I did go through the track listing for the anthology. There's no alternative takes available for this on Anthology. I've not sort of done some Google work to see if they are elsewhere. I know you've mentioned that alternative take. Be interesting to have a little listen to that. I just think you could have done so much with this. And here am I, a man with no musical ability, telling four people with lots of musical ability that they should have done something a bit better. But there you go.
That's what we're here for. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that at all. Yeah, I think it's an interesting lyric, and I think we do continue to see Lennon's developing skill. Yeah, words like slip and sip. So you kind of get a double rhyme along with shade and lemonade. That is a degree of lyrical sophistication that he wouldn't have been capable of. I think even really on Rubber Soul,
Yeah.
which is not to be disparaging, but you can just clearly see that there's something which has moved forward. And even using a word like slip, not move or go or something a little bit, more simplistic, just demonstrates an interest in language that will continue to make itself, very visible as we go through Revolver. And as long as Lennon is doing that, then he's really at it's kind of peak Lennon. There's a definite period where he just stops. Now, whatever the reason for that is, let's be honest, it's probably drugs. Like there's a point where he that ability slips away from him. And it's going to be very interesting to chart that as we go through the next couple of albums. But right here in 1966, the brightness and the sharpness of what he is capable of delivering also, it's worth mentioning, this is a very short lyric. There's not a lot of lines going on here, so that it's a lot packed into a little. And while I find some of the interpretations of it a bit of an overread. The idea that the sun and the rain represent the different symbolic aspects of the real world and the psychedelic experience of ego death and all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of that is really putting too much weight on the shoulders of this song, but that doesn't mean that the lyric isn't effective in and of its own right, because it absolutely is.
Are there people out there making
Oh
claims
yeah,
like that?
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
all
yeah.
right.
There really are. Yeah, the idea that this is actually quite a socially conscious and political song, and that the sun and the rain represent two different aspects of reality. So the sun is this new freedom that the hippie generation have managed to come to understand, and that ties in with Leary and the psychedelic experience and all that kind of stuff. Whereas the rain is the mundane, it's the everyday, it's the world of reality that most people live in, and that the hippies are kind of fighting against. So yeah, that it absolutely is one of the interpretations of the lyrics of this song.
Well, I think they've not actually. I mean, this is a bit rich coming from me, the person who doesn't like looking at specific words, but they haven't actually looked at the words. It just seems like he's taking the piss out of the English.
well,
Um,
well, yeah.
and yeah, I mean, come on, you know. Anyway,
Yeah. Well,
yeah.
I mean, that's exactly
Um,
what I meant earlier on when I was sort of saying, the song seems to have started with Lennon saying, yeah, it's about people who complain about the weather, and then gradually, as people have tried to reinterpret it, this additional weight or these additional readings have come out, and yeah, you can get some of it in, but you can also go way too far on this.
so I think that one of my when revisiting this song, the first thing that came into my mind that this is probably the best Oasis song ever, um, and I still hold that opinion because I do think this is a song that Noel Gallagher has tried to write lots and lots of times. He's come pretty close to it, but he's tried to write it quite often. It is worth pointing out, by the way, for I'm sure loads of people will know this, but before they were called Oasis, they were actually called The Rain, although that name was coined before either of the Gallagher brothers joined the band. But there you go. I do wish that whenever I listen to the song, that Lennon would really go sunshine in the way that Liam does, which is just the archetypal Liam Gallagher pronunciation. But it's something lyrically that I think people can misunderstand. So I think this is well, I understand where people go with their interpretations, because something that is simple can lend itself to lots of different meanings. Whereas I think Noel Gallagher looked at it and thought, well, simple lyrics are great because they're accessible, and lots of people will just like the song because they're quite simple and straightforward. I do still think that there's a lot more sophistication to it in terms of Lennon's humour and his sort of satirical elements. But if people want to argue the case for this being part of the psychedelic revolution that never happened. Good on him. Good on him. That's fine. You know what? Yeah, move on. I do think that there's something that I do want to mention, and that's that I think the verses are strong. I find the harmonizing that breaks the song up. I just don't like. I think it's actually, in my view, I think it's just a case of Lennon either didn't want to write or couldn't write a chorus to go with it. Discuss.
Maybe. I mean, it's continuing. You know, it's rain. I don't mind. Shine. The weather's fine. So it's continuing that kind of slight. Well, it's not continuing. It's beginning a kind of breakdown of kind of the when it rains, we moan about it. When we go out, we moan about it. And it's kind of flipping that in its head. You know, regardless of what it is, it's okay. So there's a little something in there, and I think the vocals are relatively effective. What I really like about that is like McCartney's really high register kind of bass line underneath it. McCartney, I haven't really talked about McCartney in this song, but actually his bass line is fantastic in this song. Really, really good work. And yeah, he's got those little underpinning dee 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 kind of bass line underneath the those breaks, and it's really, really effective. It kind of adds a bit of tension to it, and it gives it something other than just the harmonies to carry it through. McCartney's work is really, really good in this song. I don't mind those harmonies. I think they're fine, and I'm okay with the idea that it's kind of inverting the kind of the meaning or the emphasis of the first two verses. Let's say.
I just don't like the way they make rain and shine last for about 15 syllables each.
That's also fair enough too.
Yeah. But then, that's a subjective opinion. Aren't all opinions subjective? So it's something that just kind of breaks up a potentially really interesting song. And again, it could be that they used up all of their creative ideas on everything else that was going on around it, realized that this wasn't going to be good enough for the album, and therefore go back to the old thing that we've seen in previous albums. Let's not spend quite as much time on this as we are going to do with other things. So, it was recorded on the 14th and the 16th of April. Um, so they are spending a reasonable amount of time on it. But on the 14th of April, they were also still working on Paperback Writer. Um, so there is that sense that, it's 16th, yeah. Yep. Okay. Right. There's a little edit for you to take out. So on the 14th of April, they are also working on Paperback Writer. It's not like the days of yore when they were doing 2 or 3 songs in a session. They were tending to dedicate to just 1 or 2, but certainly even compared to Got to Get You Into My Life, which there's a typo in McDonald's book. We'll come back to that when we get onto that song. Is still being recorded over 4 or 5 different sessions. This is just we'll give it a day and a half, perhaps. We'll give it the credit of a day and a half, which just doesn't seem as long. And I'm reading into it, as other people are as well. Just maybe they were aware that they didn't have everything they needed to make this absolutely top drawer. So, what should we do then? Backwards guitar solo. Now, that reminds me, there was an REM song, wasn't there, where oh right, we've got was it So Far So Numb, which was started off as a really, really good song, and then you can actually work out the point at which they gave up thinking that this was half decent, because they think, what should we do for guitar solo? I know, backwards. Yeah,
Doesn't What's the Frequency Kenneth have a backwards guitar solo on it?
yeah, yeah, but that actually sounds. Yeah. Okay. Right. I'm a hypocrite. I don't care. But go back and listen. It is So Far So Numb,
I'm
isn't it?
pretty sure you're right about So Fast or Not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's one where I just think there's a really good song there, but that is an objectively bad guitar solo. But there you go. Anyway, right. Rain.
Yeah, I mean, I think you are sort of right to just emphasize one thing about this song, which is it's a B-side. And there may well be a good reason for this. Like, the A side is Paperback Writer, and that's, fine, it's a great song, whatever. They could have made this a double A if they'd wanted to. They chose not to. And I don't know. I don't know. I don't want to start assigning thoughts to people when I don't really know what was going through their heads. But there were options around this song. Yeah, not least of which was either including it in the album or making it a double A with Paperback Writer. And we'll see how bad double A decisions could be when we get to Strawberry Fields Penny Lane. But, it's a B-side for some kind of reason. And we know that the reason that this is a B-side isn't for the Strawberry Fields Penny Lane, oh, we have to get something out and we've finished 2 songs, here you go, and that's why they're not in Sgt. Pepper. We know that's not the reason in this case. So, yeah, why is it a B-side? Well, it's not quite good enough for Revolver. I think that's kind of probably the answer.
It wasn't like they then started, the record company in America thought, oh, you know what we'll do? We'll whack it on one of our cut up albums either. It's it's sort of interesting in that respect that around the world it remained a B-side. So it's fine. It's fine. Loads of bands have loads of good B-sides, and loads of bands don't bother. But that's kind of by the by at that stage. But there are. I hasten to say, I don't know how much more you have to say, but I was about to leap into covers
Go for it.
at this point. There are 2 really good covers of this. And, ladies and gents, I want to introduce you to the one, the only, the absolutely amazing Petula Clark from, I think, about 66, when it was kind of in vogue for people to release versions at a similar time to the originals were being recorded. There was that immediacy there. But then, if you didn't have a massive back catalogue of pop songs to choose from, you kind of had to take what was there. But I also want to give you, well, yeah, the woman, the myth, the legend. I'm building her up a bit too much here. Barbara Dixon.
Yeah, well, we're a
Barbara Dixon.
very pro Barbara Dixon podcast, this one.
Well, I mean, you have much more expertise on Barbara Dixon. My main history with Barbara Dixon is thinking, oh God, yeah, it's the 2 Ronnies, it's the musical interlude, it's either Barbara Dixon or Elaine Page. Right, let's go out of the room for 3 minutes until the jokes come back. However, this is a genuinely brilliant version because it actually makes it more tuneful, which is not that hard to do, John and Paul, please note. But it really does make it a beautiful, haunting song.
Yeah, I think I mean, we've talked about cover versions like fairly recently in the podcast, and I stand by my kind of definition of a good cover version, which is able to do something completely different to the original version of the track, but also retain what it is about the track that made it worth listening to in the first place. I think you mentioned Rent by Carter USM. I mentioned Always on My Mind by Pet Shop Boys. But this cover version does exactly that. It takes this song, it really gives it something else, but it manages to retain what it is that made the song interesting in the first place. I'm a big Barbara Dixon fan. I loved her folk stuff in the 70s. And yes, I know a lot of people's association will be the 2 Ronnie stuff in the 80s. But she has an amazing voice, and I've always been a fan. And it's lovely when she does something like this that really, I just think it's great. I think it's such a great, clever, like beautiful little version of this song. And she did an album of Beatles cover versions, and they're not all remarkable. I'll be honest with you. Like, they're fine. It's a good album. It's nice to listen to. They're not all breathtakingly amazing, but the cover of Rain is just, yeah, like you said, it takes this song and it just makes it this lovely, fragile little thing, and it's just lovely. It's amazing.
It's nice when that happens, and it's a little too rare that people do that with Beatles covers because I
Yeah.
think they're in awe of it. But then, of course, we'll come back to that theme when we come to one of the greatest covers of any Beatles song, which I think you and I both agree on, which is "With a Little Help from My Friends," and there's no dispute on that whatsoever. Um,
Ah, yes, the podcast ending episode.
yes, that'll be the one.
That's the one.
That'll be the one.
Looking forward to
So,
it.
this is a good song. I think it is significantly better than an awful lot of the early Beatles output, but then it's a bit unfair to compare it with the early Beatles output when they had matured by this stage, even though we are only talking about what 23, 24 or something like that. Um, and their songwriting ability has matured, but I do think it pales in comparison to an awful lot of what was going on around that time. I mean, I would still give it a 7 out of 10. So I'm still rating it quite highly. But if it didn't have the backwards guitar solo and it actually had a chorus, who knows what I'd give it? Maybe it would be up there with some of the greats that are yet to come.
Well, that's fair enough, and you have nicely avoided me asking you what to score it. So thank you for that. I'm going to go with a 7.5 on this, and I feel I'm maybe being a little ungenerous, but yeah, I mean, it's that thing of like, yeah, well, we've got so much to come. We've got Lucy, and we've got Walrus, and we've got all those like genuinely stunning pieces of music that this is absolutely part of the foundation for, but which doesn't quite seem to hit exactly the same height. So I'm going to go with 7.5 on this one.
It's interesting that you default to those because I'm not a massive fan of Lucy and Sky with Diamonds. I would have gone for Golden Slumbers or um, one. And here's a spoiler for the future. One song that I fell in love with as soon as I heard it that I don't think gets the love that it deserves. It's "Cry Baby Cry."
Oh, I adore Cry Baby Cry. Oh my god, that's one of my absolute favorite Lennon songs.
And actually, of course, bearing in mind the lyrical theme, there's a massive Lewis Carroll theme within that as well,
Oh
isn't there?
yeah,
So,
it's almost all Lewis Carroll imagery. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
I absolutely fucking love that song. It's amazing.
And is it interesting then? I know that we've kind of tying up, but of course, in some of those that we have mentioned, and in fact, some of the you've mentioned that there's a point in which he gives up lyrically, which is probably when he starts using the found lyrics. He stops writing about himself, and yet he rather pretentiously at other points in his life says he's only interested in singing about his own truth. Well, we've got some evidence, John, that maybe that's not the case. But there you go. There you go.
Lovely. All discussions for another day. Anything else you want to add before we sign off?
Oh no, no, I'm all talked out.
Lovely. Well, in that case, all those lovely listeners out there can really get a hold of us. You can contact us by email. We are BeatlesStuffology@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think about Rain, given that our opinions aren't necessarily the most common ones on this song. So if you've got something to say, please do get in touch. We're also on Twitter at Beatles_ology, and we are Beatles Stuffology on Instagram. You can also find my blog at www.jgmcquarrie.scot, where I talk about books, films, TV shows, and whatever takes my fancy. Please like, rate, and review us on whatever podcast you're using so that more people can find the show. Next episode, we will be starting Revolver properly, and we will be kicking off with Taxman. But until then, keep listening.